Alright, to begin with, each student is going to get a styrofoam plate, and you need to use a Sharpie marker to write your name on the back. And this is your plate to use the entire rest of the project. You do not throw this plate away until the project is completely finished. So, at your table you're going to see that you have 2 egg crates full of paint. So at the start of class, what you need to do is open up the egg crate, and then along the edge of the tray are popsicle sticks that have dried paint from the previous period stuck on the end. So do your best to match each color, and it's fine that this paint is dried and chunky on the end. It's going to kind of turn into a spoon, which makes it kind of easier to scoop the paint out. So I'm going to stick 1 stick in each color. And then if you notice, the popsicle sticks are leaning out towards the side of the egg carton. And that is easiest to keep these sticks in order. When these sticks all lean towards the middle, that's where they all start to get crisscrossed, and it's hard to figure out which stick belongs to which color. So that's why I like to just lean them back towards the outer edge. Alright, so once all the sticks are in your egg crate, now you're ready to begin to decide what colors of paint you need to work with for that particular class period. So, when you look at your project, you should always have your photo next to you because you're trying to reference or be inspired by what you see in the photo. So I am going to try to work with similar paint colors that I see in mine, but you also needed to decide which style of landscape painting you wanted to work with. If you wanted to do Impressionism, then you might make your colors a little bit lighter by adding some white into it when you do the little short dots of color. If you're going to do Post-Impressionism, then you might use more brighter colors, and then remember you're doing the longer brush strokes. If you're choosing Fauvism, then you're really not going to pay attention to any of the colors in your photo, because Fauvists use bright, crazy colors that were unnatural. So what you would have been looking at is how you sculpted the outline in 3D and kind of following the basic shapes with that particular photo. But if your goal is to paint in realism, then you really are trying to recreate accurate color and texture that you see within the photograph. So I think for this example, I'm going to be doing something that's kind of a style of Post-Impressionism that has kind of bolder, longer brush strokes. So what you need to learn about when you are mixing or getting your paints, only get colors that you actually need within your painting. So my painting doesn't have any sort of red or pink. I've got a tiny bit of like yellow and orange within the house, so if I know that I'm not using any red or pink, then I'm not even going to waste time putting that paint color on my paint tray. But what I'm using a lot of is blues and greens, a little bit of browns within this area. So I'm going to make a plan, and I'm going to paint background to foreground. Most artists do paint background, middle ground, foreground, and I'm going to kind of pick my night sky colors to begin with. So I know that I'm going to be using the dark blue, and I might throw in a little bit of purple and possibly a little bit of black. So I'm going to take that popsicle stick, and I'm going to scoop out some dark blue and wipe that on my plate. And then I'm going to get a little bit of purple, scoop that out, wipe that on my plate. And a little bit of black. If you notice, I did not put these colors right next to each other touching. I kept them farther away so that the colors stay more pure and less contaminated. Also, the important thing is that once you scoop that paint onto your plate, that popsicle stick has to go right back in the color it came from. We do not want to be contaminating these paint colors, which means the blue stick should never go in the purple, the yellow stick should never go in the brown. The color stays within its assigned spot, and that's how we keep the egg crate pure and we don't contaminate the colors. Please do your best not to mix up the colors. But if you do see that your paints got contaminated, I'm going to show you how to take care of that. So if your paint got a little bit of a color that doesn't match on the surface, like this. So I've got a little bit of dark blue on the light blue. If you see that your paints are contaminated, the way that you fix that is you just take the stick of the color that does match or belong, and you're just going to scoop underneath that contaminated color and pull that off the surface. Then just use your napkin or your paper towel and just wipe that contaminated color off, and you're good to go. Put that stick right back in the color, and that's how you clean out contaminated colors. Okay, so now I am going to decide if I want to mix any colors. So I might mix a lighter bit of dark blue that I see where this star is really shining bright. So I know that I'm going to need some white to lighten my color. So I'm going to put white in its own spot on my plate. Then what I'm going to do is put a little bit of brown, or oh my gosh, put a little bit of blue next to it. But if you notice, I did not wipe the blue across the white, because then the white gets on the stick and it contaminates the stick. I put the blue next to it. But if I do accidentally touch the white and the stick becomes contaminated, I just get my paper towel and I just clean that off before I put the stick back in its color. Okay, so now I'm ready to mix the color. So at your table, you have a tray with paintbrushes. So I'm going to be taking a paintbrush, and the easiest way to mix the color is to use the end of the paintbrush handle, and I'm going to always put the darker color into the lighter color. This takes less amount of paint and it turns the color faster. So I'm going to get a little bit of blue on the end, and I'm going to start mixing that. And I know that I need to go darker than that, so I'm going to scoop out some more blue and mix that around. And maybe I want a little bit of a gray tone to this. So now I might also add in some black to start to bring in the gray. So I'm going to wipe off the end of that paintbrush handle with my paper towel. And I'm going to scoop up some black. Be very careful when you're mixing in black. It doesn't take a lot of black to really change a color quickly. Alright, so now I've got kind of this blue-gray color. And if you're going to be doing Impressionism or Post-Impressionism, you really do want a lot of varieties within your colors, like lights, mediums, and darks, because those brush strokes should stand out individually next to each other. Okay, so now that I've got my paints chosen for my sky color, I'm going to begin to paint. So this brush hasn't been used yet, so what I want to do is get that brush wet to begin with. At your table, you have a Tupperware filled with water and a sponge floating in it. So I'm just going to wipe my brush in that water and then kind of wipe it off on the sponge so it dries it slightly. But you always want your brush slightly wet before you start to dip it in the paint. So now I'm going to look at my photo and make a plan, figure out where I need to put my color. So for me, I've got this area that's kind of like a mountain line that's going to be the blacks. Then I've got my treescape, and then all this sky. So I know I'm going to be putting blue all up along this sky up here. So I'm working with Post-Impressionism. So I want longer, more vivid brush strokes. And I've got kind of that glowing sky over here. So I'm going to start with my light blue in this area. Okay, and as I put the paint on, if you notice that the paint looks scratchy, then you probably don't have enough water on your brush. I'm going to put a little more water on my brush, put a little more paint in my brush. And now when I start to apply those strokes, they appear more full and less scratchy. Okay, now I'm going to get a little bit of the dark blue, and I'm going to start to layer these strokes side by side, dark light, to achieve kind of that look of these individual brush strokes that Post-Impressionism was famous for. So as you paint, you need to ensure that you are covering all of the white plaster. So if I just painted like this, that's too much white showing through. So you're probably going to have to layer quite a bit You just need to be patient. The wonderful thing about using acrylic paint is that when acrylic paint dries, you can paint over anything. If you decide you don't like that color, then no big deal. When it's dry, you just pick a different color the next class period and paint over it until you do find one that you like. So I'm going a little bit of light blue, a little bit of dark blue. And where they mix, I get a medium blue. And that is what I want to see because I'm doing post-impressionism. You need to consider what direction your brush strokes are going when you start to apply your paint. The other fantastic thing about acrylic paint is that when acrylic paint is wet, you can mix colors directly on your canvas or your project. So right now, I've got this dark blue put in place. If I want to put lighter blue right on top, that's perfectly fine. They actually start to mix to make a medium blue. So this is how I'm going to proceed. I'm going to proceed filling up my sky and just kind of working in those big bold brush strokes. Once I finish my sky, then I'm going to work on my tree line. And then when my tree line is done, I will move down and work on the building, the grass, and the water is going to be the last thing that I do because that is in my foreground. And then when you get to your 3D pieces, make sure you're painting the side edge of your 3D pieces as well because you'll see this from all sorts of angles, front, side, so you want to make sure that they do get a nice coat of paint. Okay, so at the end of class, when it is time to stop and clean up, what you're going to be doing is putting your project on your shelf to dry. And your photo should stay with your project. Then you have to clean up your table. So this paint plate has your name on the bottom, and this plate you're going to use for the entire project. So you need to decide, are you using this paint again? Is there enough paint to be saving? If it's thick enough, it can save with some tin foil. So if I was going to save this to use next class, I'm just going to set a piece of tin foil over the top, and then I'm going to fold the tin foil around the bottom, and then I would go put this tin foil with my project on my shelf to have that next class. However, if you don't have thick enough paint to save, or if you're done using those paint colors, you do not throw this plate away. What you're going to do is you're going to take your paper towel, and you are going to wipe these paints off. And you got to be careful that you don't break your plate. But I'm just going to wipe all that paint off, and I'm going to go throw that paper towel away. And this plate, I'm going to leave all that color on there to dry overnight. That's not very much paint. It will be perfectly dry next time. Acrylic paint pretty much dries to become plastic, so I can put fresh, brand new colors on top of dry paint next class, and they will not mix together. So no matter if you're using tin foil or wiping off the plate, your project, and your photo all go in your assigned shelf to dry. Then you need to take care of your supplies. So, your dirty paintbrushes that you use today, you need to clean them. So, the way to clean your paintbrush, you're going to swish it around on the bottom of the Tupperware. Then you're going to wipe the brush on the sponge. The sponge is going to clean it out to get the rest of the paint color, and it's going to dry it out. And then you lay your paintbrushes sideways in these trays that are at your table. We want the brush laying out sideways so it can dry overnight, and the bristles should not be smashed up into the edge because then it's going to dry at a weird angle. So just kind of lay those out, make sure they are drying. Then one student, when the whole table is done cleaning, can go dump this Tupperware at the sink to clean and get new water. If you are 5th period on white day, you'll need to fill that up with new water for 6th period. If you are 5th period purple day or 6th period white day. You're just going to empty out that Tupperware and stack those on the sink with the sponges because you're the last class to paint. Then, 5th period purple day and 6th period white day. You are the last classes to be painting. So what you need to do is remove these popsicle sticks, and what you're going to do is just wipe the stick on the side of the carton, and you're going to start to line them up on the edge of the lid. You don't want the sticks to touch because then they stick to each other. And these will dry overnight, and then the next class the next day can use them within their egg carton. So, once you've removed all the sticks and they're resting on this tray to dry overnight, then what you're going to do is shut that lid. And that is how you finish cleaning up. Project should be moved, water cup should be emptied out, and then popsicle sticks resting on the side. I will dismiss tables when I see that you've cleaned up appropriately, and this is what we'll do every single day that we are painting.